I'm Dustin Baker, and this is VikesNow. This is the playoff edition. The Vikings haven't played in the postseason in 3 seasons. So we're going to go through it today, maybe get decompress a little of the Bears stuff, but I'm here with Josh Frey, who is the editor of Purple PTSD. How's the week treating you in this playoff territory?
Tell you, Dustin, I'm getting kind of hyped. I'm definitely feeling that playoff game coming in a couple days. I'm super excited for it. First time we were talking about it off camera, but first time we're covering the Vikings as official writers. So yeah, this is gonna be a fun weekend. I think. Looking forward to it.
I agree. It gives me a little bit of anxiety that they just played them in the same building 3 weeks ago, because it kind of comes down to which coach or which coordinator is a better schemer of recency. But we'll get into all that. So I was at the Bears game. Tickets were dirt cheap. I took my homie Yannick, who's been on the show before, and we sat in the second row, conveniently on the Vikings side, right where they warmed up. It was pretty fantastic. On your couch, sir, what did you glean from Bears Vikings, if anything? Starters played half the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw what we needed to see from those starters. So get the bad taste of Green Bay out of their mouths, and then they go out, get a few touchdowns in the first half, sit them, and then honestly, second half, looking at. I wrote it in my game recap. Nick Mullins played probably some of the most competent football we've seen from a backup quarterback in a while. So that was pretty exciting to see. Hopefully, he gets in a little bit more work next year, and we can see a little bit more of him. And then Jalen Naylor, wide receiver rookie, he looked pretty dang good as well. Every single time he gets into the game, he's able to make a play. He seems to come through most of the time. So that was pretty exciting to see as well. Other than that, I don't think we really needed to learn too much about this team from that Chicago game, because I think we kind of expected what was going to happen, and it kind of did. So
With Mullins, he really is a damn good QB2. With the expectations that he's probably not a QB1. He seems like the perfect guy that if your team drafts a quarterback with the 29th overall pick, you play Mullins for the first 8 weeks, you go 3-5, then you hand the scepter to the new. He seems like just like that perfect guy. I remember when he started with the 49ers, and he can really sling it. He can really put some yards on the board. From the Chicago game, I was glad. I told viewers yesterday, I was glad the offensive line got 2 quarters worth of work. And I knew Chris Reed would be fine. I knew he just
yeah,
needed practice because he's a damn good football player. And we think, well, yeah, playing Madden, just slide him on over to center. He'll be fine. And as Brian McKinney says on our other show all the time, like, God, that shit doesn't work, just like how seamless you think it is. But the Bears are in the books. The Vikings finished the season 13-4. The first thing I want to talk to you about is the national appetite for picking the Giants over the Vikings. I've got a theory here. I want you to tell me if it's right or wrong. So every playoffs, every wild card round, especially with this expanded format, never do all the home teams win. And so when an analyst sits down to make his picks for the week or write about them, he says it's probably a temptation because these are good football teams in the postseason to go with the home team, because you're like, oh, well, let's see, Jacksonville, Los Angeles. I'll give the edge to the home team. But it never happens where all the home teams wins. Therefore, these guys and gals have to look at the docket and find road teams that are going to win. And because the Vikings are not a strong 13-win team, I think they are the prime candidate for everybody to say, oh, there's my road win, the Giants over Vikings. Is that a correct analysis, or am I messing it up a bit?
I do think that that's part of it. I think the Giants are definitely the pick, just because Vikings, they're 13-4 with a negative point differential. That can't be right. So there's no way that they're going to win this game. Meanwhile, I mean, if you look at it though, the Giants also have a negative point differential, and they only won 9 games. So I mean, yeah, you could go either way with that one, I guess. But I mean, if you really have to pick if you have to pick a road game, why not just pick the Cowboys over the Buccaneers? Because that to me seems like the most obvious pick if you're really desperately trying to find one of these teams that are going to win on the road. I think Cowboys, that's a no-brainer to me. I think they're probably gonna run away with that one. So I don't know. It's just kind of more of the same, where people are doubting the Minnesota Vikings because that's just how it goes this year, I guess, because they got too lucky during the regular season. But yeah, I do think that there's some merit to what you're saying.
The funny part about the Cowboys game against the Commanders on Sunday was, I think on the show with McKinney, last week. I said something. It just dawned on me in that moment. I was like, what if the Vikings play their starters and still get beat by the Bears if it's one of those nasty games? And then, of course, that didn't happen. But that's exactly what happened to the Cowboys.
Yep.
And
Yep.
yeah, and it really, if you look around at various power ranking entities, it really dropped the enthusiasm on the Cowboys. I've seen some call them the seventh or eighth best team in the playoff field. And that's kind of funny. I think when it comes to Cowboys Buccaneers, which could have implications on the Vikings second round matchup, it's that by the numbers that the Cowboys are a better football team in 2022. But then nobody wants to pick against Tom. And I think that's the
Right.
problem, is that they're a fashionable pick because they have the greatest football player of all time. All right, Giants Vikings, two simple questions. Go with the bad part first. What worries you about this Giants matchup?
Well, first and foremost, I am a little bit worried about that interior offensive line still. It was good, like you said, to see Chris Reed definitely bounce back in week 18 after a rough outing against the Packers. But I do still have some questions about being able to cover up guys like Dexter Lawrence on the interior of that Giants defensive line, because the first time they played, Lawrence was all over the field. He had his way with Austin Schlottman throughout that entire game. I think he had like 6 tackles, a couple QB hits, and I think a TFL in there as well. So yeah, that's definitely going to be one of the main issues that I think the Vikings are going to encounter, is that interior pressure. And then again, on the offensive line, Oli Udoh at the right tackle spot. We're gonna have to see what he's truly made of at the tackle. I know he got a bad rap last year because of his snaps at guard, but he worked his way out to tackle and he looked a lot better, and he's looked a lot better so far in the regular season, but his only true start is against the Bears, and they don't really have any great pass rushers right now.
Twice now, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we're definitely gonna see what he's truly made of against Kayvon Thibodeau, Azeez Ojulari, all those guys. So those are the main things for me. And then just trying to find a way to establish the run and shutting down the Giants on the other side in the running game, because Saquon Barkley, like we saw last time, he can break off any run at the worst possible time. And he basically kept the Giants in it during that second half, while Daniel Jones was kind of just playing game manager throughout the entire time. But yeah, if they can do those things, keep Kirk upright, get the run going, shut down the Giants on the other side, especially in the running game, I do think that they've got a great shot at winning this one.
All right, my kind of big talkers on this one, and then I'm going to ask you here what you're excited about for this matchup because they drew the Giants. My big talkers on this one, I wrote about them a couple hours ago, is that the Vikings are so turnover dependent that when they're usually they force turnovers. So let's not get it twisted. It's not like half the time they don't. They do force a lot of turnovers. However, when they do not, they're not good. The defense gets exposed. Right. It's a real shitty defense if they don't force turnovers. So we can take bend but don't break, do whatever you want with it, flush it, endorse it. It's a turnover dependent defense, plain and simple. And if it's one of those games where they're not stripping balls from dudes' arms or grabbing interceptions out of the sky, yikes. My other one is third quarter hell. There's only been a couple games where the Vikings have been average or good in the third quarter. Other than that, they have like this Jekyll and Hyde, where third quarter look like utter garbage. Fourth quarter, they look like gods. If they could just be average in the third quarter, I think they can go on a run. And then I'm really interested to hear about this one. This is such a massive game for Kirk Cousins. You have this 13-4 team. He's been unlocked. People finally think he's good now because he has fourth quarter comebacks under his belt, and he's actually been good the whole time and probably even better last year by the numbers. But in theory, even if it's not his fault, if they find a way to lose at home after a 13-win season with a brand new head coach who built this offense for him, no matter how the Vikings would lose, it for Cousins only, it would erase all of the goodwill, all of the enthusiasm about him going forward. And next week we'd be talking about, is he the right guy going forward? I think they absolutely need this win for Cousins' legacy in Minnesota. Is that overstating it?
I don't necessarily think it's overstating it. I'm just wondering, this just came to my head. Now, is this the first time that Cousins has played a playoff game at home in his career?
No, they were one of those shitty division winners in 2015 because the Vikings won. Packers got the wild card, and the Packers, of course, smoked them at FedEx Field.
Right. Okay, yeah, I forgot about that one. But yeah, I do think that this is an important game for Cousins. I don't necessarily think that there's no way for him to look okay if they lose this game, just because there has been heat on this defense all year long. And if they put up 28, 30 points, something like that, and they still end up losing this game, I don't think you can put it on Kirk Cousins. It's probably going to go on Ed Donatel, and then a couple days later, he's probably out of the office, you know. So I do think that there's a way for Cousins to ride this one out, even if they do lose it. But this is a very important game for Cousins, and if he wants to go down as one of those potentially Hall of Fame quarterbacks, he definitely needs to get a few more of these playoff wins, get a Super Bowl ring under his belt. So yeah, this is an important month for Cousins.
Yeah, that's a very good caveat to my on the fly argument here. Let me put it this way: he can't have a meh game, and he certainly can't have a bad Kirk game, because we know what those feel like. There's 1 or 1.5 per year, and so yeah, if he was like he played against the Lions a few weeks ago, looked like Dan Marino, and they still lost. Yes, I'm with you, but he cannot have one of those games where we're looking at what would it be, about 4:30 p.m. on our watches or phones. We're like, God, he just doesn't have it today. Can't have that. Otherwise, I don't think it'll be run out of town, but it will reignite every debate you've ever thought of about Cousins in your life. And I kind of think, you talked about Ed Donatell's defense being suspect, and I'm talking about it being turnover dependent. We almost need to have a fabulous Flacco-ian stretch from Kirk if they want to win a Super Bowl. I don't think we realistically think they're going to win a Super Bowl. But I think that would be the one segue. Either that or the defense all of a sudden shows up and looks like the Zimmer defense from 4 or 5 years ago. And that you probably would have seen by now. We know Kirk is capable of going on stretches and Kirk Vember or whatnot. And this year he's actually damn good in December. So yeah, I think it's a big week or 2 weeks for Cousins, who has to be a $35 million QB. What excites you about this Giants matchups? The Vikings theoretically could have played the Seahawks, Packers, Lions, Commanders in the final 2 weeks of the season, at least for playoff scenarios. Why is it good? Why is it cool that they got the Giants?
Well, I think that if you're really just looking at all the opponents that they could have faced between, like you said, the Seahawks, Lions, Packers, I think this is the most quality team that they could have come out and played against this weekend. And if they do go out and get a win, I think that really just proves that they belong in this conversation as potential Super Bowl contenders. Because if they went out and beat the Seahawks, they'd be like, oh, you could say that they just floundered towards the end of the season after their 6-3 start or whatever it was. Then Lions, Packers, it's just a bad NFC North this year. They didn't really have great seasons. They had inconsistent stretches throughout the year. So I think the Giants are probably the team that, when we look at it, among all the possible opponents, this is the most quality team. And then I just think that this is another just great opportunity for Justin Jefferson to go off for a huge game, and his potential statement, I'm here, I've arrived, this in his first playoff game under the bright lights at it's what, 3:30 Eastern or 3:30 Central that this game takes place. So yeah, I think that's the most exciting part, is just being able to finally see Jefferson play in a playoff game, because we've alluded to it before. If they went through these first 4 years and they'd never played in the playoffs, he'd probably be out of town. He probably wouldn't sign an extension.
Rightfully so.
Right. Yeah. He deserved to go find somewhere else where they can actually get him a Super Bowl ring. But so this is a really exciting weekend just to see what he can do in this sort of situation, because Giants haven't been necessarily great against the pass all year, and he lit them up in the last time they played. So this is gonna be a fun weekend for that reason.
Yeah, both defenses by the numbers are pretty bad. I just want to get that out there. So if there was ever going to be a shootout, it should be this one. Then again, they just played and it wasn't a crazy shootout. It was a kind of an ordinary scoring game. Another thing on Jefferson is now, kind of out of nowhere, he's overdue. The Packers game did not go well for anybody, and especially him. And then against the Bears, his hair looked sweet, but it was just kind of meh. Whatever, he had 30-something yards, or was it 30 or 60? He ended up having just a mundane first half and didn't break any of the records. One point about the NFC North, for I want to ask you a couple extraneous topics, is so the Lions, they're going to be absolutely everybody's fashionable pick for the next 8 months because of how good they looked, how they ruined the Packers season. So you can go ahead and pencil them in for at least a 10-win season per what pundits are going to say. The Bears have the first overall pick and have all the money in the world to spend on free agency. So if they know what they're doing, that's a big if, they're going to be right in the mix. And then we'll have the Rodgers shit for 2 months. And if he comes back, everybody's going to think it's a revenge tour. Or if he doesn't, it'll be the Jordan Love era. So we had this weird little year where everything was in flux for the Vikings to go win 13 wins. So let's hope for their sake they can make something of it, because I don't think that NFC North will be bashful going forward. All right, I want to ask you about the Bears in a second, but before I forget, PFF started mock drafts, not season, but 2023 off of the bang, and they said bada bing Tanner McKee to the Vikings. Up until I read that little piece, I thought he was anywhere from a second rounder to a fifth rounder. You're the draft guy for both Vikings territory and Purple PTSD. McKee to the Vikings, yay or nay? And is it too early to spend whatever it was, the 27th pick?
I'll be honest, I haven't done a ton on McKee yet
Okay.
so far, but I do think that that's a little bit early for him. I'm kind of with you. I think he's definitely more of a mid, late second round, maybe even early third round type of player. And I just think that the Vikings, especially if we're not going to have the Kirk Cousins debate, which we shouldn't because he's locked in through the next year at least, in terms of a starting quarterback, I don't think that you need to go out and get one in the first round because you just have so many other needs on the roster between wide receiver, linebacker, all the things that we've talked about, cornerback even. So I probably wouldn't do that, especially if it's McKee that we're drafting in the first round. Not anything bad on McKee or anything. I think he's going to be a quality quarterback, at least from what I've seen. But it just feels early for especially somebody like that who's probably going to be a backup for the first couple of years of his career.
Couple things on this situation. McKee is a throwback to pocket passer, and I mean, he might have a little athleticism, but he's not what coaches crave now. So anybody who's just getting familiar with him, if they did do that, I don't think they will, you'd be getting like an Andrew Luck style, not as good, but Andrew Luck style quarterback. And then I'm starting to think, I got to ponder a little bit more, but I think this might be the year where we don't add on an extra year for Cousins. I'm starting to think they'll just let this one play out because he's 35, and then he'll get whatever it is, 40 million guaranteed for this season, especially if they lose this weekend or next. I think it might be that time to not add on an extra year, especially if they do some shit like draft McKee or get some guy in the third round. Don't take that to the bank yet, but I'm starting to think this might be a year where he plays out his contract. The Bears, thank you, Minnesota Vikings, got the first overall pick. The Texans whimsically or strangely decided they didn't want it. And now the Bears have it. What did the Bears do with the pick? Did they pick a quarterback, even though Poles said he had to be blown away? Did they trade it for a ransom, or did they just pick Will Anderson and call it good?
I think you probably look to trade it, especially with so many teams in that top 10 that are going to be looking at quarterback between the Colts, the Raiders, potentially if they trade Derek Carr, and even the Texans. Like if they don't want the Colts to jump them for Bryce Young, then maybe they have to move up and get him anyway and trade that second pick. If I'm the Bears, I'm definitely first looking to move down just because you have so many needs all over that roster, and you could use the extra draft capital in this year's draft and next year to fill some of those roster spots. But if it comes down to it, I'd be totally content with picking Will Anderson at number one overall. I think he's a generational type of edge rusher, like Myles Garrett-esque type of player. So I think that he's going to be a star, and they definitely need that edge help, and he'd provide it right away. So first trade it, but if it comes down to it, just take the best player.
It's always kind of interesting and cool, even though the Vikings never picked that high, that when you get an edge rusher with that first or second pick, that guy's good. Plain and simple. Like somehow scouts don't miss on that spot that early in the draft process. Now I'm sure there's one from like 2008 I'm forgetting about, but as of late, it seems like those guys are money. You can't go wrong. I mean, you watch Aiden Hutchinson, and then Trayvon Walker coming on at the end of the year. I know the Bears won't do this, but if I was a Bears fan, which I never will be, it seems like you haven't had a quarterback who's good since the 50s. You've had iterations of good ones, Jim McMahon for a year or two, Jay Cutler was cousin-ish for 5 years, but it's almost like just go ahead and get a quarterback in between Fields and this once and for all, barring godforsaken 2 strikeouts. Let's get it right. If I was a Bears fan, I'd be like, let's put this thing to bed once and for all. Between Fields and Bryce Young, one of the guys has got to be our dude for the next 10 years. Now, that's probably just me thinking out loud for the Bears because I don't care about their future. But there's got to be something there that says swing for the fences because one's got to work out. Is that dumb?
I mean, I could see it. But we've talked about this so many times. Like I don't think that there's like that generational talent in this draft at the quarterback position. So I'm kind of doubtful about Bryce Young. I tweeted this yesterday. I was shocked by this, but there hasn't been a starting quarterback in the NFL listed under 200 pounds since 2001. Doug Flutie, and Bryce Young is listed anywhere from 194 to 197.
Really?
And I think Flutie was at least like 6'2". Young's going to measure in like 5'10", 5'11" at the most.
Okay.
So this is like a type of player that we've never seen before. I think that if you wanted to take him and you were super sold on him, then sure, go for it. I think he's going to be a fine starter, but injuries come to mind. Like Kyler Murray's had so many over the past couple of years, and then just if is he going to be able to even see over the offensive line, because that was a trouble throughout Drew Brees' entire career. He was on his tippy toes the entire time he was in the pocket because he couldn't see over anything. And this
Yeah.
guy's even shorter. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of question marks with both of these guys. CJ Stroud is probably the more NFL ready, but he's the opposite of Justin Fields. He's got a great arm, but he can't move at all.
Yeah.
So you're kind of moving in the inverse there. And looking to next year, there's going to be a ton of quarterbacks. Caleb Williams is going to probably be that guy, like the Trevor Lawrence type that we've been hoping for ever since Trevor Lawrence came into the league. So I do think that if you want to go after a quarterback, why not run it back with Fields one more time, see what you can do, give him some receivers, give him some offensive line help. And then if it's still a bust next year, just go draft Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I think perhaps I initially have overstated the quarterback talent in this draft because last year was so terrible, or at least underwhelming. Besides Pickett, I think Pickett's going to be pretty damn good. He showed flashes to me. So yeah, maybe everything I feel about this draft class is applicable to 2024. And I had no idea that Bryce was that slight in terms of weight. And you bring up Flutie as a comp in terms of weight. Flutie was like the exception to every rule. You're probably a little bit young to remember him, but he really isn't like, well, look what Doug Flutie did. That guy was like everybody's favorite player because he was like your dad out there, the way that he played and looked. And so, yeah, it doesn't surprise me one bit that he was the last guy because he was pretty damn unique. All right, here's my little speech. And this is going to go out on the tape here for my Vikings prediction. I think 3 times since we've established this one score win mantra for the Vikings, 3 times I've said this is going to be the game where they beat somebody handily. So I've come to the conclusion that because we've dinked around for 18 weeks and the Vikings just beat teams by 8 points, I think it was all a grand precursor, a teaser trailer to this game. And I predict the Vikings win 30-13 over the Giants, just so they can get us really motivated about going to the 49ers and then probably losing there. So if it's not going to happen, well, here I've predicted it 3 or 4 times now. And this is the last time I can predict it, because if they win, they're not going to go shellac the 49ers. So 30-13 Vikings, pretty bold. What's your score and why?
I'm going 24-20 Vikes. I think Kirk Cousins leads another one of his game-winning drives. He's due for one at this point. It's been 2 weeks since he's had one. So it's about time he gets another one under his belt, right? And then 24-20, you gotta get that Greg Joseph field goal accounted for as well. He's going to miss a field goal early in the game. Vikings are down 3 with a couple minutes left. We're all going to be freaking out on Twitter, and Kirk Cousins is going to save the day once again. So that's how we're going to ride into San Francisco next weekend.
All right. On that note, you kind of stole the top there. Any chance the Seahawks beat the 49ers? Yes or no?
I do think there's a chance.
Okay.
I think there's a chance just because Brock Purdy, 3rd string quarterback, rookie, Mr. Irrelevant. He's been decent, but I don't really see that he's the reason that the Niners have continued winning these games. I think it's just the talent all over the roster, and he just hasn't had to do much, and he hasn't made any mistakes, and that's great for him. But playoff time, that you get Pete Carroll's defense, he's going to draw something up against him that he hasn't seen before, and he might force a few turnovers. The 49ers are 2-0 against the Seahawks this year. It's hard to beat a team a 3rd time. So I do think there's a chance. I think the spread is like 10.5 at this point. I'd probably take the Seahawks to cover that one. But I think the Niners will squeak it out.
I'm convinced, and we'll end the show on this note. I'm convinced whether it's against the Seahawks, the Vikings, or the Eagles, there's going to be a drive with about 4 minutes left, and the Niners are down 4, and Purdy is either going to have a 4-and-out, incompletion on 4th down, a fumble, or an interception that's plain bad. And then we will, half hour later or the morning after, be like, well, of course, he's Mr. Irrelevant. That was bound to happen. His luck ran out. I'm convinced that will happen, not because he sucks or anything like that, but because he's just manning the ship. He's pretty damn good. And he's not battle tested for this, whether it was college or here. I think that, and then we were just going to look at each other and be like, why did we predict the 49ers to go to the Super Bowl? Yeah. They had Purdy. He wasn't ready for the bright lights of the 4th quarter against blah, blah, blah. That's where I think we'll be. Hopefully for his sake, he bucks that idea, but it just seems too obvious. And I don't know which team it'll be against. But I think the script is written that way. All right. You got 24-20 Vikings, which was a much more rational score than this asshole. I got 30-13, and it's exciting and depressing to say when we talk next week. We'll either be talking about the divisional round, maybe a home game, probably a road game at the 49ers, or we could be talking about offseason needs or doing an autopsy. Isn't that weird?
That is so weird, and I'm hoping to God it is the former and not the latter, because I'm not ready for the off season yet. This season's gone by too fast. I'm not ready.
Yeah, all of these days, there's so many close, exciting thriller wins that they all kind of mesh together outside of the Bills and the Colts, that you look back at the Cardinals game or the good Lions game or the Bears game, and in a regular season, those wins would have been like, oh yeah, remember when Cameron Dantzler ripped the ball out of Amir Smith-Marset? That would have been the highlight of the year. And now it's like a complete footnote that was like, oh yeah, that was way back when. All right,
Yeah,
man.
no, it's crazy.
We got appointment television next Wednesday, either talking about the offseason or talking about the division round. Any closing arguments?
Let's go get a win this weekend, baby.
All right. Take it easy, sir.
See ya.
Later.